A very big welcome to our audience, to our speakers, to this session from Future Market Insights. And of course, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, because like we were discussing, you're joining us from all over the world. So a very warm welcome to you. This is the third Global Plant-Based Summit from Future Market Insights. And this is sponsored and partnered by Equinom and PBFIA, which is Plant-Based Foods Industry Association India. And for our audience who are joining us new, I'll just quickly introduce you to Future Market Insights and then get on to introducing our speakers. Future Market Insights is a market research and business consulting company. We specialize in the field of plant protein, but not just plant protein, but also a wide range of specialty and functional food and beverage ingredients, as well as the entire landscape of food and beverage, among other industries. We are recipients of Clutch Business Leaders Award in the field of business consulting 2022 on account of high client satisfaction score. Yeah, just a little bit about how we what is our methodology for research. We look at and we analyze the market across each node of the value chain, starting from raw material suppliers to the technology companies, contract manufacturers, processors, to distributors, and the end users, as well as consumers such as me and you who consume plant-based. On the right-hand side, you will see some of our key publications in the plant-based market. So you will receive all of that in the presentation after the summit. Now, in this session, we will be discussing about some of the key challenges which processors, manufacturers are facing in the plant-based industry, and how key leaders, key experts from the industry are rising up to the challenge to bring about innovative solutions that help overcome the gaps to create winning formulation. So without further ado, let's move on to our speakers. A very warm welcome to all of them. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Shalev, who is our keynote speaker. He is the founder and CEO and the driving force behind Equinom, which is an integrated food tech company headquartered in Israel and USA. He founded Equinom with the vision of cultivating better food ground up with the best use of technology, thus helping in creating superior formulations. Thank you, Gil, for joining. And we also, from Equinom, we also have Galit Feinrich. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. She's from marketing. She will be joining us for the audience Q&A at the end. Moving to Nandini Choudhury, who is a client partner at Future Market Insights and practice lead for food and beverage. She has been analyzing the plant protein industry for over 7 years and is a veteran at Future Market Insights. Thanks, Nandini, for joining. Moving on to Professor Ante van der Goot. He is professor in the Food Process Engineering Chair Group at Wageningen University, Netherlands, and he has been researching on financially viable and advanced novel ingredients for meat substitutes. Thank you, Professor, for joining. And then Professor Colin Campbell. He is Professor Emeritus of Nutritional Biochemistry at Cornell University. He is the one who introduced the term plant-based diets. We have the man within us today. Amongst his well-known projects is a collaboration with China that began in 1983 and prompted the book, The China Study, which has been translated into 50 foreign languages. Thank you, sir, for joining. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Sanjay Sethi. He is Executive Director at PBFIA, Plant-Based Food Industry Association, which is the apex body in India that works hand in hand with the Indian government to further the development of plant-based industry in India. A very warm welcome to all of you. And before we kick this off, a few guidelines for our audience. The audience is muted throughout this summit, but at the end of the summit, we will do an audience Q&A where we will take in your questions for our speakers. We will address them within the scope of our time. So please leave your questions in the chat box that you see on your console. We will try our best to address all of your questions within the time span that we have. But if we cannot take a few in the interest of time, we will get back to you individually with the answers. Also, this session is being recorded. So our audience will receive a recording as well as the slides that are being presented sometime tomorrow. That was it. So let's start off with Mr. Gil Shalev. But before we move to his keynote presentation, I just wanted to give you a quick glimpse of Equinom and what is the vision of Equinom in the plant-based industry. So I will just play this quick video for you. So speakers, please let me know if you can hear and see the video.
This is a story about food and about change. It starts with...
Yes.
You can hear it as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, perfect.
And about change. It starts with understanding that our global food system is unsustainable. Although daunting, there is a solution. What if we could remake our food system from the ground up? What if we could restore biodiversity to our food supply by farming new varieties of non-GMO crops that don't just grow well, but are tasty, nutritious, and designed to feed people, not livestock? We must. And at Equinom, we are. We know that shifting to a more plant-based diet is necessary for a healthier and humane future, and that Mother Nature has provided us with everything we need to flourish. We see a brighter future in which Equinom and our partners throughout the supply chain inspire the widespread evolution to healthier, sustainable eating with delicious, nutritious culinary creations that spring from the soil. If you share our intention, we invite you to join us.
Okay, perfect. That was a great video from Equinom. Thank you, Gil, and your team for sharing that. So tell us, Gil, you are the CEO and founder of Equinom. What was the vision of Equinom when you started, and what kind of challenges is Equinom solving in the plant-based ecosystem?
Well, thank you very much for being here. It's an honor for me to be part of the group. I want to say that at the beginning, the story of Equinom is standing behind a very simple principle. And the principle is if you start from the source, from ground up, there is a huge advantage that you can develop down the road within the supply chain. And there is a lot of challenge because you basically need to combine a lot of activities into one company. But if you find the right partners, definitely there is a way to be successful. And that's basically what I would like to share with you today with our short presentation of Equinom. So if you can go to the next slide. Before kind of saying what we are trying to change, let's kind of trying to say what is the problem. And I think everybody can agree with us that looking on plant-based ingredients, the major problem is that we are using the source of those ingredients mainly coming from commodities, crops that never bred for food. If you can go to the next slide. So, a simple equation, it was bred not for food, and the question is, so what is the problem? First, most of the seed business industry is working to breed the crops for mainly feed, not for food. So mainly quality and attributes are not there. That require a lot of processing. A lot of processing require big facilities. Big facilities require heavy logistics in transportation and operation that need to handle those ingredients from one big operation site to others. Not very good ingredient, let's say like that, require more additives to the main food application. And at the end of the day, we are trying to maskify the quality of the ingredient that we're creating for seeds that were never bred for food. And at the end of the day, we are ending with customers that are not satisfied. And the question next slide, the question that we are asking ourselves, so what basically we can change? Now, zooming towards the plant protein industry, the major challenge today with the plant protein industry is that is being based on the isolated technologies. I need the next slide. There is some delay, so I will try to say next slide even before I'm ending the slide. So looking today on the plant protein industry, we are all familiar that most of the plant protein that is being used today in the industry is being processed using isolation. Now, the problem of isolation is that you require heavy processing. The facility will cost you $500 million to establish. That means that if we are looking 10 years from now, we will need about $27 billion of capex to invest in those facilities, and to run the operation is fairly very expensive. Next slide. So what is the challenge? The challenge is that at the end of the day, you end by an ingredient that cannot meet the market demand. And second, you end with an ingredient that is very costly, and at the end of the day, the plant protein cannot grow because everybody is complaining it doesn't really compete the meat industry. So what we have done, we develop solutions to basically eliminate the needs of using the isolate processing of pea protein as of today, and I will kind of share with you what was the journey to go there. Next slide. So again, let's go to our first assumption. What will happen, or how Equinom is working, where you start from ground up, from the seed itself. So we are basically breeding crops that are meeting the quality, the nutritional value, and the taste of the end users. We have to work with local processors because at the end of the day, the crops that we are breeding is going to be processed with our partners because the processing has become a very crucial element, and our goal is to eliminate or to reduce as much as we can processing. Now, when you breed a variety of seeds that have to meet the ingredient and the food application, you need to work with food development. Because at the end of the day, it's not just breeding the seeds into the field, it's a seed that will convert to ingredient that will convert to an end food. Therefore, we have our own capabilities and we are working with external partners to make sure that we are breeding towards the right application. And at the end of the day, we are very sensitive of the customers, the end users, because at the end of the day, all of our work is basically to support the food system. Next slide. So basically what we are doing, Equinom, we are trying to solve the food crisis by evolving the way that we eat. And why? Because we believe once you start from ground up, there is a huge effect that you can contribute to the food system. Equinom by itself, it's an ingredient company that combining technologies, AI system, precision breeding, and others to basically target the right combination of seeds towards the ingredient. And our main vision is let's start from the beginning, from the ground, and then going towards the entire supply chain to make sure that the development is meeting the end application. Next slide. So how does it work? We develop a platform, we call it the Mana platform. Basically, it's developed, it's hold within itself several units of developments. But at the end of the day, the system, the Mana platform, it's starting from the seeds. If you go from the bottom to up, it's starting from the seeds. We are breeding new crops or existing crops for quality traits, such as soy, pea, faba bean, chickpea, mung bean, cowpea, and others. We developed new proprietary gene pools of seeds that will meet those definitions. We have precision breeding technology that enable us to create the right crossing because it's a non-GMO or no gene editing. We are doing classical crossing, but we are doing it in a very accurate manner while we know what is going to be the potential of a specific cross. Somebody will ask, what is the potential of a specific cross? Is exactly what we are doing with our machine learning system, where we're able to take users, food companies, ingredient companies, to understand exactly what is the ingredient functional properties that we need to breed, and then provide it to our breeders and to our system to make sure that we are breeding the right crop. At the end of the day, we validate all of our ingredients. I'm saying it's not seed. The seeds it's validating in the farm, but we are validating all of our ingredients within the end users for taste, sustainability, and at the end of the day, our main mission is also to make sure that we are reducing the cost of those ingredients, because that's the way for us to evolve and to make sure that the industry will use those ingredients. Right now, we are working on plant protein, but definitely there are going to be more down the road. Next slide. So how does it work, or how we work? We cannot do everything by ourselves. So the way that we work, we elevating an existing supply chain. How we elevate an existing supply chain? We sign partnership with each one of the stakeholders within the supply chain. So we signed agreements with farmers and grain handlers in North America. We signed agreements with processors that take those seeds, grains, and process it to protein. We signed agreements with food manufacturers that testing our ingredients and making sure that they are meeting their application. And at the end of the day, we don't sign any agreement with customers, but we are on a daily basis understanding exactly that every single step that we have to move forwards have to meet the end customers. So it's a very rare position where a seed company is basically meeting the end user. But we don't see how we can really support the industry without be involved in each one of those stakeholders within the supply chains, which make it a bit more complicated for a company basically also in the size of Equinom, but it's also providing us a huge advantage because in every crossing, on every variety that we are evaluating our field, we see the entire supply chains moving after. Next slide. So where we are today, just to make sure that we are not just talking and we have some product today in the market, after 7 years of reading yellow pea for pea protein, we successfully enabled to produce ultra protein yellow pea varieties that also have specific functional properties that enable, one, to grow those in North America in the same conditions and area that yellow peas is being grown today. It enables us to reduce significantly the amount of the needs of isolation, basically to moving towards concentrations. At the end of the day, we are reducing the cost of the processing by 50% and increasing the quality, the taste, and most important part, also the ability to increase sustainability and reducing carbon footprint of the ingredient that we are producing. So this is something that already run today in the market in North America, North Dakota, and Canada. And we can go to the next slide. Basically, we already have a curve of productions. You can see the regions where we are producing all of our crops. So basically, region number 3 and 4, it's not for peas and soy, it's for other crops. But on the right, you can see the growth of our grains production in North America. People will say, why you don't run it faster? Because we can't. It's seeds, it's biology, it takes time to ramp up the seeds and the grains productions. Next year, we're already targeting 30,000 acres of peas that will grow in North Dakota and Canada. And moving forwards, I'm speaking about ultra protein soys and other crops. Next slide. So basically, to sum up, and why we are basically approaching to the industry and running those webinars and doing as much as we can, because we believe that at the end of the day, we are not going to be successful by doing it by ourselves. We need partners. We need partners that are holding some of the activities within the supply chain. We will support all the technology, we will support all the ingredients, we will support all of the requirements that need to really improve the ingredients, meeting our visions. It will start from ground up, and we need really to create a value to really make sure that the supply chain is become sustainable. But that's basically what we do. We believe our success is going to be based on our technology and the right partners that we will sign today and moving forward to the future. And that's on the nutshell who we are. Thank you very much for hosting me here. Now, my apology. Yeah, I will have to leave in a few minutes, but Galit will take the Q&A later on. My apology. I kind of will try to do things in between. So thank you for the opportunity to be here in this webinar.
Well, thank you so much, Gil. I know that today is a holiday, perhaps in Israel, and you have other, priorities to get to. So thank you so much for taking our time for us today. And of course, we have, your marketing lead. So she will take up the questions that we have from the audience. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Much appreciation. Enjoy the webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, Gil. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right, so we'll do the audience Q&A at the end. But again, a quick reminder to our audience to please leave your questions in the chat box. so that we can take it up at the end. All right. So then we'll quickly move on to Nandini. Hi, Nandini. So you are of course client partner at Future Market Insights. You have been analyzing the plant protein market inside out for the last 5 to 7 years. So, let's hear from you, because we're talking about ingredient sourcing challenges. So let's hear from you. What is the market potential for the different ingredients that we have today? Where we stand as of now, and where are the opportunities so that our audience who have joined us, which are ingredient companies, which are food and beverage brand, they can actually think of how to diversify their ingredient portfolio.
Thank you, Aditi. And please, yeah, we'll start with the presentation. So yeah, I completely agree with what Mr. Gill said, that we actually need to start from scratch to leverage the supply chain effectively. And it is a very well-known fact that plant-based food are getting traction and fast, and I'm not going to discuss on that. However, currently, plant-based brands are concerned about sourcing issues regarding ingredients from various plant-based concepts such as plant-based meat, dairy, egg, seafood, spreads, herbs and spices, and so on. And this presents a serious challenge since ingredient sourcing is highly customized, and it becomes inherently more challenging since the customer base is increasingly diverse. In order to understand the real challenges, we need to first understand the real discussions which are happening right now across the world with respect to the plant-based ingredients. The keywords that both brands and consumers are using while discussing the plant-based ingredient ecosystem are minimal processing, credible labels and health claims, sustainability, animal welfare, environmental concerns, natural ingredients, simplicity, transparency. So we have all heard about these keywords, and we know the meaning of each as well. Next slide, please. So in order to focus more upon what is happening in the real food movement, so FMI did a recent survey, and what we find out was 41% of the adults agree that meat-free foods that have short list of ingredients are more appealing than those with a longer list. 62% of the US adults agree that whole plant foods are healthier than processed meat. So basically, they believe that meat alternatives maybe are right now overly processed. 54% of Asian consumers agree that many free from claims are not meaningful to all the food applications that are available in the retail shelves. So, with just these three statements, we can maybe very easily conclude that the customer is very straightforward with their demand. They want plant-based products to be simple, less processed, and should have a clean ingredient. However, even though this trend of clean, non-GMO, natural ingredient has been coined time and again, when we go actually into the market and see the real numbers, the story is somewhat different. Next slide, please. Now, for the four key ingredients that are right now driving the plant-based ingredient ecosystem, to say so, soy, pea, rice, wheat, it is pretty clear from the numbers that conventional products are still having a significant share in the market, and clean label, natural, non-GMO ingredient still have a long way to go to become the mainstream ingredient. We can see actually that the growth rates are estimated to be very impressive. Clean label and non-GMO claims, though having less market share, are expected to be having a pretty smart growth rate in the next 10 years. However, we need to actually analyze the industry from the supply side and know the real reasons for such market dynamics. Next slide, please. So the food supply chain has changed dramatically in recent years to become more complex, with food items traveling farther than ever before, containing more ingredients, and required to follow stricter regulations. Many of the changes to the supply chain are for the better, but the reality is that the supply chain isn't quite there yet. Suppliers, retailers, and producers at every part of the supply chain needs to work together to ensure transparency and food safety compliance. It is very important to understand, despite of so much buzz about the claims and resourcing of ingredients, why we are still not there yet. When FMI launched a survey, the two key challenges that every single manufacturer of the ingredient supplier indicated was cost of the raw material, shelf life of the raw material. Now, these two common issues that the suppliers were ready to discuss up until 2020, but then when we deep dive further into the challenges of sourcing raw materials, there are quite a few pointers that can be discussed. The increased popularity of plant-based food has created new supply chain problems, particularly given that many of these organic products are being introduced by traditionally non-organic merchants. Organic supply chain and produce suppliers have long followed regulations regarding product handling, such as temperature control, cargo tracking, and supply demand planning software to ensure that the product could be tracked from farm to table and, in the event of a recall, traced back to source. But the difference from then and now is, hello? Yeah,
Yeah, we can hear
yeah.
you.
We
Yeah,
can
thank
hear.
you. So the main difference actually between the supply chain issues with then and now is that in plant-based food products, supplier needs to tackle numerous ingredients for a single product, and the supply chain is not sustainable enough to handle clean label, natural, or even organic ingredients. The food industry is now debating how to store and handle meat alternatives, how to manage each ingredient in the product, and most crucially, how to determine temperature control for the source of infection. Along with cost and shelf life issues, new challenges in raw material sourcing are that plant-based meat brands require temperature-sensitive storage, workforce needs to be technologically equipped, a consolidated information system is required to ensure supply chain visibility, and there is a lack of investment across these nodes of the supply chain. Next slide, please. So let's discuss a few points that might help with outlining a supply chain strategy for plant-based ingredients. So talking about infrastructure first, from high level, the meat alternative supply chain is shorter and much more compact than conventional meat supply chain. Producing plant-based meat requires the process called as high moisture extrusion, which basically means the infrastructure requires to handle the processing at different temperatures. Now, it is advised for the upcoming plant-based brands to impanel with a supply chain specialist for their temperature sensitive storage needs, since they will be well equipped to handle the products with low shelf life and temperature controlled needs. So the basic requirement right now is that the plant-based brands or the processing ingredient brands, they need to go to the specialist and they should not rely upon the conventional methods of the logistics. Talking about the workforce, according to our research, when asked about the skills that supply chain employees should possess, 73% of the respondents say technical competency is extremely critical, and even more, 79% believe leadership and professional competencies are extremely important. The technological capability required now are those that enable supply chain experts to address complicated risk management or statistical modeling issues that might rise in a complex and ever evolving plant based meat sector. The bottom line is that when it comes to niche category like plant based ingredient, the workforce needs to be both technologically equipped to understand the process that are defined and specific to the industry while adhering to compliance and being able to take quick action in case of a tough situation when as and when it arises. Talking a very important point about technology, which will be the key driver for the supply chain logistics in future. A centrally system can accommodate and adapt uh, the all the recent developments and involvement in the plant-based ingredient ecosystem. It will allow plant-based ingredient brands to respond to the market changes at a faster rate. This would make it easier for the ingredient suppliers and the processors to identify which ingredients oriented from which farms and would enable them to act promptly if an ingredient went bad prior to the processing. Though the use of technology such as barcode tags, RFID cards, it would be easier to separate poor batches of components from good batch, so avoiding a crisis situation at the start of the supply chain cycle. Product and supply management services such as SRM, called as Supplier Relationship Management, and SLM, called as Supplier Lifecycle Management. So these kind of software and services enable companies to locate suppliers, reduce delay, and resolve issue of unavailability and enhancing the transparency and traceability. So when heading into the next decade, many organizations in the food service chain are also looking at new applications like IoT, automation, and blockchain to curb food safety issues. FDA has taken steps to pilot blockchain and AI programs to better track drugs and food products in conjunction with major food brands and technology companies. So the technology is something where the brands need to really focus and invest upon. Next slide, please. Now, other than the infrastructure, workforce, technology, there are few other aspects as well that might help in pushing the envelope a bit further. Um, Localization, not globalization, will solve the problem. So it is very important for the manufacturers to understand and focus upon the indigenous raw materials and not run towards the most common raw material which everybody's using, such as soy or pea. So, for instance, in India, manufacturers can focus upon raw materials such as millet, lentils, or chickpea, of whom a country such as India is a major producer. In Americas, manufacturer can focus upon raw materials such as sunflower protein, potato protein, bean, corn. In Europe, key ingredients to focus upon can be grains, legumes, cereals, rapeseed protein, and maize. Basically, localization of raw material can be very helpful in mitigating price fluctuation and ultimately the costing and even the unavailability of the raw materials, which is actually one of the key issues that we are discussing. Um, Talking about investment, which is actually a very big and crucial driver for the industry right now. Um, we have learned that there has been approximately 540% jump in the investment since 2019 in the overall plant-based ecosystem. Now, regardless of whether any of these alternative scenarios come to pass, substantial capital must be invested across the protein value chain to support the protein transformation. But it is very interesting to know that only 7.2% of the total investment goes into the downstream supply chain. It is now very important for the investors to actually move away from the heavily processed food. As per the newest wave of innovation that we have identified in the plant-based ecosystem, the consumers are conceptually moving away from processed or lab-based food to food-based food. So investors need to understand that putting money into production capacity expansion or branding and marketing will not go a long way until we strengthen our route of sourcing. Similarly, regulatory bodies internationally or the governments now need to interfere. Open access to R&D, government policies, initiatives, incentives, and building talent pool are what will help the market take off in the way that it is poised to and really keep the momentum going. Uh, the last point with this regards is the diversity of ingredient portfolio for the brands will be the key. So talking about the dynamics of plant-based meat, eggs, seafood, and dairy under one umbrella of plant-based food is not actually ideal. Each product type has its own challenge and trends with respect to ingredients that they are using, and each product needs to be analyzed separately and formulated and reformulated as per the customer expectation and resources available. So, having said this, let's move on to the last section of my discussion. Next slide, please. The slide indicates the key ingredients in use and their demand forecast. So we can see that the market attractiveness analysis indicates clearly which of the protein ingredients are said to be dominating the market. It is interesting to witness how the next level of ingredients, such as canola, mushroom, fava bean or field beans, even flax protein, they are going to perform, considering their increasing adoption in various food products. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it is not fair to analyze the market under one single lens of plant-based food. Each category has to be analyzed separately, and sourcing strategies are also to be made differently. Um, so talking about plant-based seafood, so the alternative seafood industry is brimming with innovation. Few of the emerging ingredients are the ingredients which are derived from seaweed, particularly alginate, algae-based ingredients. When we talk about plant-based meat, few of the emerging ingredients, other than the ingredients that we are already using, will be the microbial protein derived from fungi. Another innovation in this space is transforming woody biomass into fungal protein. And a very recent ingredient which has been rapidly getting adopted in the industry is the mushroom plant-based, which is also called as fungus meat. So it is estimated that if consumers were to replace just one-fifth of their red meat consumption with microbial protein derived from fungi or algae, deforestation could be reduced by a staggering 56% by 2050. So, with this fact, maybe food players must also ensure that any of the ingredients that they are using or the supply chain logistics they are using, the short-term performance of the ingredient supply base isn't coming at the expense of its long-term health. Understand the value chain rather than just accepting what ingredients do cost. Companies should invest time and effort to find out what they should cost. At the end, I would like to say rather than making a general product for the mass, big companies or the niche companies, new companies should identify a specific trend, a specific demographic, and build a product around that and can outline a unique supply chain that ensures if integrity of their unique offering is met and the positive influence of the brand is resonated through its potential market. Also, for almost a decade now, we have been educating our customers and suggesting our brands to think a certain way, to do certain things to get the pie in the market. But I guess now it is the time when we must push and leverage the government of the big emerging countries. We must leverage the government policies and incentives and educate our investors to invest in the right node of the supply chain. And as Mr. Gill said, to the very start or to the very scratch of the plant-based ecosystem, the investment is required more rather than increasing the production capacity. So yeah, thank you. Over to you, Aditi.
Well, thank you so much, Nandini. It was very informative, and you shared a few very strong points, which is a very nice bridge to our panel discussion, which we will start in a minute, where you talked about some of the winning strategies, and the formulation is the key, right? Because consumers, so building a product that consumers want, or the type of claims that consumers want to see, for example, low processed, low refined, high in protein, non-GMO, organic. So it's a big challenge for manufacturers to live up to that. And therefore, like I said, it's a nice bridge to our panel discussion. We have Professor Atze, we have Professor Colin Campbell, we have Mr. Sanjay Sethi. So I'll start with Professor Atze. So you are working with your team and as well as a lot of private companies in order to find out some of the novel ingredients. Um, and like you just heard in the previous session, that what consumers want is low processed, they want low refined, they want clean label. So in your research, in your university, have you come across any novel ingredients that can be used to prepare plant-based or meat substitutes with low refined, low processing? Could you share some insights on that?
Yeah. So, Aditi, thanks very much. And I could not agree more with the presentation of Nandini. So that's really, really nice. I think the key word for me was also the localization. We should go away from one size fits all. I think that's a very nice and key aspect. Yes, what we did, I'm quite busy in the area of structuring materials towards plant-based meat products. Of course, we studied extensively the usual suspects like soy, pea, and wheat. Excellent ingredients for that application. But we also studied certain fractions of rapeseed, sunflower, mung bean. We also looked, for example, more in fractionation processes of extraction from protein from algae and leaves. So in a way, we studied a lot of proteins. What we noticed, though, was that fractionation or extracting proteins from novel sources is quite difficult. And we also noticed that soy and wheat, for example, or gluten, can really give functional properties very effectively and cost effectively. So finding an alternative which is as good and as cost effective as the usual suspect, soy and wheat, turns out to be quite difficult. What I also noticed is that there's a lot of things going on in developing novel protein sources, fermented through fermentation, for example. But I think what we have to do and really understand is how that should end up in our product. So it's not only making a protein-rich crop or material, but I think indeed understanding how it should end up in the product, what are then the requirements for certain ingredients, and how to meet the consumer. I think that part is indeed a little bit underestimated yet. So it's not only about making the proteins, but also how to use it.
Yeah, indeed, that's very true. And when you talk about, what is important is, how to make the protein. And you spoke about a few versions that you're working with. Is there some kind of novelty in the production process that the processors need to think of? That, okay, this is the way, this is the innovation in the production process that I need to maintain in order to, have that low processed, low refined, but high in protein content. I'm asking this question because in our audience, we have a lot of food ingredient manufacturers, food and beverage brands who would be really looking at innovation in the production steps as well.
Yeah, maybe I certainly believe in diversity of ingredients. So instead of having a standard soy protein isolate, I know there are already many, but maybe we should also have a soy protein concentrate, or maybe ingredients in between the isolate and the concentrate, or maybe ingredients in between the flour and the concentrate. So really a big range of ingredients that complicates the supply chain, of course, quite a bit. And I think what we also should try to avoid is the drying step. And we normally like to have, of course, the powder as the end point because that transport easily. So if you reason a bit further in that direction, I think the next step will be much more the integration of fractionation, making ingredients, and the production. So I believe that in the long run, maybe ingredient suppliers will have a really different relation with the final manufacturers. So maybe a big ingredient company will have many smaller plants next to the place where it's manufactured, and maybe they can just make the ingredient in time without drying and apply it in the plant-based meat product, for example. So I think it's not only about localization, I also believe in integration, especially, and then of course you can also allow yourself to make many more ingredients without having the burden of a supply chain if it's immediately used on location.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you say, that how things can shift in order to cut down on the drying, in order to cut down on the processing. That could be the future. Also, one last question that I wanted to ask is that you are, of course, working with a lot of private companies, right, on the commercial viability and the production process. Can you share examples of really like these kind of successful projects which are commercially viable to make and cost competitive as well?
Now we are really in academics that are in the starting point of development, but I think in the recent time we show really potential of extracts, fractions from rapeseed and sunflower, I think, to be used as a very interesting ingredient for meat analog applications. Especially the sunflower concentrate has quite unique properties with respect to fibrousness, juiciness, and neutral taste, actually. So there you see that a new ingredient or a new crop for this application can really deliver new options. The point there, of course, is what to do with the minor ingredients, such as phytates and other bioactive substances, how to deal with that in those new crops. And then you suddenly realize that soy doesn't have so many of those types of factors. So explaining again why it's such an efficient component for that application. But for Europe here, I believe that sunflower could be an ingredient of the future. We made some steps, and I hope that company will further develop that.
Okay, that's great. I mean, it's great to see these examples that you're sharing, and it's quite inspiring for our audience and for us as well. So thank you so much, Professor, for sharing those insights. And I do see a few audience questions flowing in. So, let's just hold that, dear audience, because we move on to Professor Colin Campbell. So, hi, sir. You have organized and directed the China project, which was the first ever research project between US and China. And I believe the findings were covered as a lead story in New York Times as well. And I know for a fact that there are very compelling findings from your study, which talks about how good is animal protein versus plant protein for us from a nutrition standpoint, which might even kind of break some of the misconceptions we have about animal protein, or plant protein, or which is better for us in terms of protein content. So I will just pass on to you so that you can share the findings from your study. And I have your slides. I will just project them here. Yeah.
No, that's not mine.
No?
Yes.
That's the one, right?
Okay, back one, maybe. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for this opportunity. I really look forward to sharing some ideas, especially on the question concerning the relative difference in the health value of consuming plant protein versus animal protein. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. I have to go back just for a moment because turns out to be a very controversial topic, as many of us know, the question concerning whether we should eat animal protein or not. But I want to just tell my own sort of background a bit because it's from that I learned what I learned. I actually, back one slide. I started my career actually doing a doctoral dissertation on promoting the consumption of more animal protein, which is exactly the opposite of what I talk about now. Thereafter, I was in charge of a program in the Philippines, developing a model for feeding malnourished children. There, we were expected to make sure these children got enough protein. That usually meant animal protein if possible, because it was said to be more valuable. In reality, next slide. Next slide. In reality, it turns out that about that time that I was there in the Philippines working, I learned that the children who were getting the most protein seemed to have a higher risk for liver cancer. At that same time, this study came from India by Mahadeva and Colin, showing that in an animal study, when animals are exposed to a chemical that causes liver cancer, then fed 2 different levels of protein, the ones fed the 20% level of protein, 20% of calories, all the animals got the cancer, the liver cancer. The animals fed the 5%, none did. Remarkable difference. And for me, that was a challenge because I came from a background believing that animal protein was more important, just like everyone else. That's really what was behind my research that started many, many years ago. Next slide, please. You might have to go through this. Okay, so it suggests that increasing protein, that is animal protein, might cause more cancer. So in this slide here, in our studies that we did in experimental animals, really turned out to be amazingly striking. That is to say, over the first 12 weeks, in this particular case, when animals fed 20% protein, the cancer is growing. Next slide. You have to go through this a little bit faster. Next slide. 5% no protein. Okay, then we did a study I was having a hard time really accepting this information, to be honest about it. So we did one more thing that really turned out to be quite remarkable. When we changed the diet during that first 12 weeks of cancer growth, when we fed the animals at 12%, the cancer grew well. When we switched it to 5%, we turned the cancer off, then on, then off. That was a really remarkable thing because we tend to think of cancer, once started, it's going to continue to grow. Here was a case here where just changing the level of protein had a remarkable effect. Animal protein increasing cancer, and that the red is animal protein. Green, turn it off. Next slide, please. Next slide. So it led to another really major concept, and I'll mention this. Well, and that is that in cancer, we tend to think that cancer is a product of just our gene background, our family background. It's not true. That certainly does contribute to some extent. But what really matters is the food we consume. And the one nutrient that turns cancer on, by far, more than any other's animal protein. Plant protein did not do that. The one that could turn on or turn off, that was the protein of milk. But animal proteins have this unusual property of increasing cancer growth. So then the next question was, because this was so controversial, what we were expected to do in research is to find the mechanism responsible for this effect, the biochemical mechanism. And I just summarized here just quickly. We spent about 15 years altogether looking for the mechanism, because if we can find a mechanism, then maybe we can have a drug to block this effect of the animal protein. So we look for mechanisms, and I just listed here on the left-hand side a bunch of biochemical mechanisms. I can't describe them here, but it turned out as we went through this process, I kept looking for the mechanism in the event that we might have a drug to stop it. What we learned after, as I say, that number of years, we found 8 mechanisms, really prominent mechanisms that are turned on by animal protein, which lead to cancer. We found 2 mechanisms were turned off. And those 2 mechanisms that turned off were the ones that protect us from cancer. So the animal protein, for those 10 mechanisms, it turned 8 on, it turned 2 off. The ones that turned off were good ones. And so it was a really quite remarkable sort of insight into what nature really does. When we consume food and all the nutrients are digested and absorbed and so forth and so on, especially on protein, It turns out that the body has an ability to take the animal protein and turn on cancer, heart disease, diabetes, a number of different things. Well, everything working together. It's not one thing. It's not one mechanism. It doesn't lend itself to treatment by drugs. So this is what really led me to the conclusion, myself, my own conversion, that animal protein is poison across the board. Plant protein is remarkably effective in not only preventing serious diseases like heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, but also has the ability to actually reverse these diseases after people have them. That was a turn on, turn off. Next slide, please. Okay, so all 10 work together. There was no such thing as a mechanism. Here's just a quick shot of research we did to show that when we tried plant protein to do this, plant protein, soy and wheat in this case, it did not turn on cancer, even if it was fed at the high level. So plant protein is basically safe. Animal protein is basically not. It's unsafe. And I know I'm talking to an audience here, most of whom already agreed with this concept. But the reason I'm offering this is because this distinction between animal protein and plant protein is so broad and so prominent. It's so prominent. And so for myself and my own conversion, we have no reason to consume animal protein. We can consume plant protein. That means vegetables, fruits, grains, tubers, of course, for energy and so forth. We can do that and get all the protein we need. We don't need to worry about having excess plant protein. That's not a problem if we're eating whole foods. The real issue is don't consume animals for their protein. Unfortunately, a large percentage of the population in the world still believe that's a reasonable idea. And that's why I'm showing this. We got a long way. We got to keep working on consumer demand for these products. And I think the information I have here really is I've learned over the years since we were doing this. This idea here: the animal protein turns on cancer, turns on heart disease, and causes a number of other so-called Western diseases. We call them chronic degenerative diseases. It's very prominent. It's unmistakable. So next slide, please. And I'm offering this to this group. Here's just a really quick like I want to show you here. These are slides here, research results in years past by other researchers. And what it shows is as animal proteins increase, that's the x-axis, those different diseases, kidney cancer, prostate cancer, heart disease, mortality, breast cancer, and more still. I collected this from the literature. We've known this for quite a while, but no one really willing to face it. When animal proteins increase, as you can see here, there's a straight line relationship with increase in the kind of diseases that actually are known as Western diseases, and the kind of diseases that really are very costly in terms of cost of health care, and the kind of diseases too, or the food that causes that, is the kind that causes a massive effect on environmental degradation. Next slide, please. I think I'm just about done here. One more. Okay, one more. That was I want to turn to the China study just for a moment here, because there we did this study that involved 6,500 adults in 130 villages across China. In China, cancers of various kinds and other diseases occur in certain regions much more prominently than other regions. So I joined with my colleagues in China and with the British colleagues, and we actually collected a massive amount of information, nutritional information. And in one case, what we found was that if we look at the relationship between animal protein intake in the form of serum cholesterol, we see a straight line relationship. That's the red bar there. That's what we see in the US. And instead in the US, we were living with the idea at that time that we probably shouldn't have serum cholesterol be much below 150 or so. It might be dangerous. In reality, in China, in rural China, the information we collected there was really pretty remarkable, because it shows that going all the way down to zero animal protein, serum cholesterol continues to drop, and as a result, they don't get heart disease. In one county, for example, 265,000 consecutive deaths. Not one person had heart disease. And so what we learned in China was really quite remarkable when compared with Western experience. What it basically says As soon as we start putting animal protein in our diet, we have problems. That in turn leads to all sorts of infrastructural problems, obviously. It lends its weight to consumer demand in this audience here, I think. Many people need to know in the world, we do not need animal protein, period. There's no arguments, no sensible arguments for that. Plant proteins do it, and the plant proteins that I'm talking about here can be any kind of plant protein. There's no big difference between one and another. It's really the ratio of the two kinds of foods. That's where we get the biggest effect of all. And I'll stop here just in the interest of time, but I just want to, what I have to offer is basically saying that, yes, there is consumer demand growing for plant-based foods. That's true. Quite remarkable in the last decade or so. But we got a long ways to go. And one way to get there is to be very clear about what the science says. It's unmistakable. Animal protein, is one of my friends often says, it's toxic. So we don't need it, period. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor. And I think there are some really eye-opening facts that you shared in the slides, some of which we definitely knew. But then with the kind of data that you have backed, to show those, those findings, it's really eye-opening. And it kind of broke my conception that animal protein is, what we need for high protein diet, and plant protein, definitely can be there, but it's not probably at par. So I will think twice before having my next animal protein, I think. So, well, I mean, really great. Thank you so much. And it was quite interesting. And I will just stop sharing my screen for a moment. All right. So moving over to Mr. Sethi. So Mr. Sethi, you are Executive Director of PBFIA, which is the apex organization in India for furthering the growth of plant protein. Now, it's not unknown to any of us that India is like, the ground for crops which we have seen in the presentation so far. All of them, India is surplus in production. So, where do you see India in terms of being a global marketplace for plant protein supply or consumption? India is also very largely vegan. So, what is your take on that?
Thank you, Aditi. Hello, everyone. So, Professor, you have been amazing. You are such a great speaker and a thinker, both. And good that you said that animal protein is poison. So I loved it, and we'll keep reminding Aditi, because she's Bengali. She loves both the milk-based delicacies and also the fish-based delicacies. So coming back to what you said, Professor, in India, many things we already knew. And Prime Minister Modi keeps reminding us that go back to the roots and look at the wisdom that your forefathers had given to you. Don't lose it out just by aping the West. And as a result, actually our list is very long. Nandini wants the list to go down, but in our foods we have long list. We put ginger in our food, by the way, and which is like a prebiotic. We put turmeric, we put clove, we put cinnamon, we put amla, and we put even pink Himalayan salt. We put fenugreek. Fenugreek is really very, very understated things. So we are not reducing the list. And when the COVID was there, our list was very long. We also included some of the Ayurvedic medicines like ashwagandha and giloy and whatnot. And if you look at the number of percentage of the I would say people who died because of corona, it was way low in India. So that means that our diets were already plant-based, and in the heart of our hearts we knew that anybody in India who was chewing meat, he knew that something is chipping away from your heart. So nobody had the gall to see the blood or the meat and things like that. So it was always because of the amazing taste of kebabs and the aroma of meat based which was basically enshrined with the amazing Indian spices, that the work did not happen on vegetarian side. And there's also some of the things that Nandini said. They resonate very well with many of us with respect to over processing and things like that. And good that Professor Goot also mentioned that we have to find out something between defatted soya flour and concentrate. That's amazing. Wonderful. What you said is amazing, because this is something that India needs and the world needs. We have been talking about whole foods, and whole foods are so difficult to digest all of these. We needed something which is as amazing in terms of bioavailability as whole foods, or maybe even better, but does not sacrifice the vitamins and the minerals of whole foods. So we needed something which is like our own mother. What she did, she took whole foods and she did something with it and made some idlis, or she made some vadas, or she made some chutneys, or made some we have a very good chunk which is based on pulses, and there's a Punjabi name for that, and it's called vadi. So it basically is a chunk which is mix of 2 or 3 different kind of pulses. So we had all those things which were not whole foods completely, which were almost whole foods. And good that Professor, you mentioned that we need to have 2 or 3 or 4 different kinds of ingredients, notwithstanding that there may be some logistical challenge. So in India, we are very excited to have some plant protein cluster. We have 73 members in PBFIA, Plant-Based Foods Industry Association, which was born about 9 months ago. And some of the work that we did with Aditi, Nandini, and FMI, especially on the report side, and we sort of mapped the entire country and some overseas markets. And we saw that how much potential in this, and we have also seen what is the kind of deals which are happening, and the money is coming one after another, and there are standards which not only the food regulator is doing, which is FSSAI, but also the export organization APIDA is also coming out. So we think that our market, which is close to zero right now, if I take out the traditional soybean milk, which is SoFit from Hershey, if I do not count the chunks, which are soybean nuggets, if I do not count the amazingly popular the soya chop, which has become now almost a household product. By the way, I had it today also in the afternoon. So if I don't look at these things, which are way away from the plant-based meat for which most of the discussion is happening, our market is close to zero. So when market is close to zero, we will climb to only $5 billion in the next 10 years. And the world will have added maybe another $50 billion. Although we did this research, but my heart says that we will reach these figures even faster. So while the economic analysis and the scientific analysis says that it will be $5 billion opportunity in the next 10 years, but I think that in India, we put in our food, in the last stage, a little bit of cream, or a little bit of maybe paneer, or those animal sources of foods, which are not really core ingredients to the recipe that we have. So, and you can easily replace that, or even if you don't put it, nothing will happen to that dal. Maybe you will not call it dal makhani. The dal will be equally amazing without the makhan, without the butter. So I think that if we start looking at that, maybe it will be $100 billion opportunity in the next 10 to 15 years, because you are not making much changes. You are just making small little changes here and there. And never forget that Indians are not cooking so much at home. Not only they are bringing in the completely cooked food, they are also bringing the better kind of ingredients, which are 50% or 70% or 90% cooked food home, and they are doing, the woman is doing only the last part of cooking in the kitchen. So there is a big growth possible in India. Can I maybe talk about the next slide now? And I would like to mention that the summit that we had, which was about 4 or 5 months ago, I saw FMI was well represented in that summit in New Delhi, in the heart of the capital, and the minister and the entire the government. You see in this the APIDA organization secretary and the minister of food processing and the executive director of the food regulator, all in this frame. So it tells us that the government is very bullish on how this sector can grow and what is the opportunity that India has. So maybe we have $50–60 billion opportunity, and we can provide those ingredients. We were always more expensive wheat than the rest of the world, and suddenly last year we became the cheapest in the whole world. So that means that was the latent strength of India. And if we are competitive in wheat, and when we start providing the wheat ingredients or wheat protein to the rest of the world, I mean, we can just beat any other source in terms of low cost processing and in terms of quality processing. And we are coming out with now clusters. So we think that one cluster is needed outside of Delhi. We need one cluster is needed maybe in Nagpur, which is the center of the country. So probably, yes, so which is in Maharashtra, but it is in the center of the country, Nagpur, and one where some big organizations like Kerry are putting up their plants somewhere near Tumkur, probably in the Bengaluru region, Karnataka region. So at least these three clusters, I would personally like to see those going up. And some of the thoughts which were mentioned, that you don't need trucks to move these ingredients. You need a pulley or you need a conveyor belt to move those ingredients. So they go from one factory to another factory. I spent a lot of time in Dubai, and I saw how sugar is being processed at Kali Sugar. They are the biggest facility in the whole world, and what they do is they through the conveyor belt, they just process the whole thing, and it's impossible to count their stock. So something like that, huge facilities are needed in a country like India, and we have seen that the summit that we had provided that kind of an opportunity, and there was so much of interest that people from all walks of life attended that summit. So next slide, please. So we also saw that some of the chefs in India are taking a lot of interest in participating in the conversation. And India is a land of taste, and Indians know how to bring some magic with the taste, and this is something which comes natural to Indians, and especially the Indian women. They are amazing in this taste, and that's why we have found that plant-based meat has just taken off, because a chef doesn't want to cut the meat, he doesn't want to dress the meat. So so I see a big revolution coming from the supply side, because they don't want to see the blood, they don't want to handle the ingredient. So you would find that there are restaurants like People of Tomorrow or Loving It Vegan Paradise or Greener, which are there in the national capital region of New Delhi. So such restaurants are springing up, and we are ourselves targeting that out of the 75,000 restaurants which are there in the big cities, maybe 100,000 restaurants in the top 10 cities, we should at least target 10 to 20% to have vegan menu in these. So next. So we have also looked at that how this protein cluster conversation brought in almost all the suppliers and all the major players from all over the world in that room, and the kind of enthusiasm shows us that India is ready to be the supplier of plant protein to the rest of the world. Next, please. So we are very clear that mung bean why it should be in the US. Nandini, we can do it in India, and all we need to do is just mind our hand on the fertilizer and pesticides, and organic or not, it should be closer to organic, sustainable, and so that we are able to provide amazing ingredients, and we don't have to apply anything the last 22 days on the plant, any herbicides. So the plant the chemistry will take care of those ingredients and throw it out of the system. So it is not just the quantity, it is also the last 22 days which are enough to throw these chemicals out of the plant very naturally and very fast. Next, please. So we will have this plant protein cluster in the next 2 years. Next, please. I think this is the last slide, or maybe one more. So these are the stakeholders. They are the big companies from all over the world. So I think we can take this presentation off. Aditi, I'm done with my presentation. And before I stop, I would just like to mention that Plant-Based Foods Industry Association is now there to partner with the whole world. We are there in the part of International Plant-Based Food Working Group. Indian startups, they are at the forefront of this revolution. They are leading the way for the corporates. Corporates are jumping in. Indians are ready with the ingredients as well as the market. All we need is to just hold each other's hands and actually make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sethi. And indeed, like me or Nandini or FMI, we've been working with you. We launched a white paper, I think it was beginning this year sometime, about the plant-based revolution. And I've seen personally the amount of work that PBFIA, you have been doing for furthering growth of the Indian industry. I think it's really commendable. And thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights there.
Yeah, your report went viral, by the way. There was a picture. You didn't show my complete presentation. There was a picture in the end.
No, of course, we will share that that white paper with the attendees as well in the follow-up mail. All right, so we've come to the end of this presentation, and time for audience Q&A. Our audience have been patiently waiting for the last 1.5 hours almost. So I'll just
before you open, may I formally invite both the professors and also Ms. Galit to our second plant-based food summit, which happens in the month of April or May, most likely May. It is not just the temperatures are hot in India. We also have very hot conversation about the plant-based foods. So it will be a pleasure to welcome all of you to come to India and grace the occasion when everybody will be in that room. This will be your best 5 hours spent. It's a very short 5-hour summit that we organize, but in those 5 hours, you will meet almost everybody who matters in plant-based sector in India. Thank you.
That is great, Mr. Sethi. Thank you so much. All right, so moving to the first question. There are a whole list of questions, but I don't think we can take them all. I'll just go through the first few that I see from the top. So the first question is for Professor Atze. What do you think will be the requirements for future ingredients?
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult to say in general, but what I think is that it should, of course, there should be a focus on nutritional value and how much proteins, etc. But I think more importantly, it should have a right functionality for certain product categories. And I think the focus on how to use it, how to make them an efficient ingredient for certain products is more important than, for example, striving for the highest protein level, because that focus on functionality maybe allows also milder processing, less processing, and that aligns more with the protein. So I think we have to set different criteria for ingredients, less on composition, more on how to use them in novel products.
Yeah, that's precisely what you had mentioned in your session as well. So thank you so much, Professor, for that. Let's look at the next question, which is for Mr. Gil Shalev, but of course, Ms. Galit is here. So she is representing Equinom. What is your focus? Why is your focus on breeding and not gene editing?
Hi, thank you. And I just want to say I'm so impressed with this panel and happy to be with you all. Really good talks and super interesting. You know, the gene editing question is an interesting one, but the bottom line is this. Number one, we don't feel that we need it. You know, I think Gil founded the company very much with a strong belief that nature has really provided us with everything we need, and there's tremendous biodiversity already there. The company has a seed vault that today has 250,000 varieties of pulses and legumes and counting. And some of those were original land races and exotics and others that we've added through breeding. And so there's just tremendous biodiversity available without tinkering with what nature has already done really well, and it's not necessary. And the other piece of the pie too is that we're really not, when you formulate for food applications, there's a lot of things that you're affecting at the same time. So of course, mild taste. We're also looking at protein quantity and quality, protein separation ability during processing so that they're efficient. Also other sensory attributes and things like water holding, oil holding, gelation, foaming. And that's very difficult. There's a lot of nuance there, and gene editing is not a nuanced tool. I think we would find that there are many more GMO crops out there if it was sort of a simple procedure, and clearly it's not. So that really is what drove us to focus on traditional editing. And then the third and final answer is really, I think that, you know, consumers are very skeptical of genetic modified organisms, and there's, you know, the various labeling of those foods. And so I think just from a consumer perspective, we'd like to keep things as simple and pure and desirable as possible.
Yeah, indeed, and of course, genetically modified has it's kind of a sensitive topic. It sometimes might have a negative nuance as well. So it's great what Equinom is doing to bring up non-GMO superior crops to create these winning formulations. Thank you, Galit. Well, let's look at the next question, which you know, you could again answer that, Galit, but it's more of a broad question. So I would also ask our other speakers to talk about that. How do your high protein varieties generate value in the industry from a cost aspect? So I think the question is more about, is a high protein or a high protein concentrate ingredient, does it help in the cost aspect to make competitive products?
Would you like me to start with that one, or would you like to start elsewhere? Okay.
Yeah, you can start, and then we'll go to the other speakers as well.
From our perspective, the high protein really unlocks the ability to do simpler processing. So when you reach a certain protein threshold, in our experience, you're able to use dry fractionation instead of wet fractionation. And so instead of isolate processing, you can literally run the high protein grains through the same process you would to get a concentrate, but it will result in a protein powder with high enough protein levels to be used for texturization, whether it's high moisture extrusion, low moisture extrusion, and to get the kind of quality of proteins that the market is looking for when it comes to meat analogs, chicken analogs, those really, you know, the texture and those fibrous cuts that will resemble, you know, a chicken breast, a chicken tender, a burger, and whatnot. And so really the protein is a huge unlock in that it enables us to get those results with very simple processing that's really essentially dry fractionation, eliminate the need for chemicals and solvents and all, even some of the things that the professor was speaking to earlier in terms of having wet applications that you then have to dry which is again not sustainable and starts to get into energy usage as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. And maybe if I can ask Professor Atze as well, because you are researching on novel ingredients, which maybe is high in protein content. Do you think that helps in, having cost competitive final products?
I fully agree with the previous speaker, and actually it hinders a little bit innovation, that the price of an ingredient is so much governed by its protein content in a way. And if you can just start with a high protein content, yeah, it's indeed that would help a lot, especially to make it more economical and allows, let's say, options as suggested. Yes.
Great, thank you so much. And if I may ask Nandini or Mr. Sethi or Professor Campbell, if any of you want to comment on that question.
Yes, so
go ahead.
Please continue, Mr. Campbell, please.
What I would suggest for our thinking, by the way, is that we tend to really emphasize protein. Find the foods that have the highest protein content, for example. Or in the case of animal proteins, for example, we call it high quality. Those are misnomers. I'm almost willing to say we almost can drop the word protein almost out of the language at this point in time, because if we're eating, in fact, plants, first off, they have plenty of protein generally. Even the potato, of all things, has enough protein for humans, believe it or not. Of course, we like to have legumes and so forth and so on. We want to increase protein content, but it's not really important. It's not as important as what many people thought. High quality protein, there's a history of that. It's really interesting. That was in reference to the amount of protein being retained that was being consumed. Animal proteins were higher than that, so it said high quality. But in reality, more protein retained, such as in animal proteins, we get higher disease problems. More cancer, more heart disease, more of this and more of that. So that concept, that term, high quality, should be dropped from the language, in my view. And in terms of the amount of protein, there's plenty in just a mixed vegetable, tuber kind of diet that obviously most societies are accustomed to. And we get all the protein we need, really.
Okay, thank you, sir.
If I may interject, from the studies we're seeing as a result of soil health and various other factors, we are in the pulses and legumes market seeing some decreasing protein rates just in those source crops over time. And so I think by seeking the biodiversity and seeking varieties that naturally have higher protein, we're really restoring, not really changing, but really restoring some of the quality of the plant-based nutrition that hopefully people will choose. And as well, I would say, I wish consumers' minds could be changed with logic and reason and scientific fact, and that's not always the case. And so I think we have, to be able to find a compromise with educating people, but also satisfying their desire to make sure that they feel like they're getting enough protein, but doing it from sources that are healthier for them and healthier for the planet, I think will be critical.
Exactly. India also had a similar thing done recently. The regulator and the medical fraternity said we don't need so much of protein. They slightly reduced the protein requirement. But we are not resting. We are stepping on the gas. We are increasing our protein content because we are on the other side of the spectrum. We are underfed as far as the proteins are concerned. And hopefully, we will also change the quality of protein. But we are already at 5.5 kilogram of animal protein per capita. So I don't think it's very high. We are only afraid that the protein content should not go up from animal sources, and what to do that, for which PBFIA has been working very closely with various institutions, research institutions, and we did a very innovative program called Navratri, plant-based Navratri, because this is the 9 days, 10 days period when people anyway don't eat any meat. So we are using this as an opportunity, something like Veganuary kind of a campaign, that you stay vegetarian, you become vegan, don't go towards the animal sites of protein, because animal protein is poison. We know it now.
Yeah, I think I agree somewhat with Professor Campbell, and I think the term protein is very loosely used in the industry, and it makes a large difference when a supplier or a ingredient processor is using the term high protein, and when a consumer is using the term high protein. So when here we are maybe talking about high protein, Gallup is talking about high protein. So I think what we are trying to say is that um, the ingredients, the processed ingredients, which are having high protein concentrations, yes, will actually will have a effective impact in the costing. First, because our panelists said that they'll actually benchmark the protein concentration for other type of proteins to be processed in the plant. Second, it will also be helpful in terms of logistics. So, if we are doing a high moisture content or heat extrusion technology usage to uh, make the high protein concentration products, then in that case, we also need sensitive temperature control logistics as well. So, if we have the higher concentration protein ingredients, then of course it will have a benchmark with respect to the technology as well. But yeah, as Professor Campbell rightly said, that we are very loosely using the term protein. Maybe when while talking, we should have a clear demarcation of when we are using the term protein with respect to the demand and with respect to the supply. So yeah.
One comment, if I may. Yeah, I agree with those comments of both of you, all three of you, on this. I didn't mean to overstate the case regarding protein in plants, by the way. I mean, one feature about plants that are able to fix nitrogen and restore the soil and create, a total complement of plants growing on the soil. That's all very good. And quite frankly, it's always helpful to consume legumes, especially in high protein foods. That's very useful. My point was that we don't need to emphasize them so much that they're going to have special properties, but they're excellent foods. I don't mean to say that in any stretch of the imagination. So, working on the concept that we should have some protein, that's a popular idea, but getting it from plants is fine, it's great. So I may have overstated the case a little bit.
Okay, thank you so much. We of course have overshot our time by 5 minutes, but we have still a long list of questions to answer, at least 6 or 7 that I see on the screen. And why I wanted the insights from all the speakers about this particular question is that I saw 2 questions coming in which were like on similar lines. How to develop more cost competitive products, because plant-based food still has a long way to go in terms of price competitiveness with the animal industry. So it was great, the kind of interaction we had on that. And for our audience, we will get back to you with the answers in just a couple of days. We'll reach out to you personally because we have your mail IDs. So do rest assured that we will get back to you with the answers. So with this, I will end this summit. It's been great having this stellar panel of speakers. I thoroughly enjoyed hosting and moderating and listening to some of the insights that have been shared. And I hope our audience enjoyed it too. So I thank you again to all our speakers for joining, for taking out time. Thank you so much, Galit, for being here for the audience Q&A. And of course, thanks to Mr. Gil Shalev. And thanks a lot to our audience who have joined us from all different parts of the world. With that, I end the show, and have a good rest of your day, rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Rockstar professors.
Bye.